The galaxy had been at peace for nearly a decade. Humanity, along with several alien civilizations, had come together to form a fragile peace pact. The purpose was simple: prevent war, unite the different species, and create a future where they could share knowledge, resources, and prosperity. The peace talks had been long and difficult, but in the end, they succeeded. For years the galaxy thrived under this new order, but peace was always delicate. On Earth, high above, in a secure government building, the atmosphere was heavy with tension. The leaders of the United Earth Coalition gathered around a long, sleek table. Diplomats, military officials, and representatives from alien species filled the room. Everyone knew the importance of the agreement. If it worked, the galaxy would prosper. If it failed, war could break out, and humanity would be caught in the middle. The treaty must hold. President Elias Crow said, his voice steady but carrying the weight of the situation. It is the last hope for peace in this galaxy. We cannot afford to fail. Around him, the others nodded. The stakes were high. Every alien race had agreed to the terms. Some species were more powerful than others, but all had agreed to a new way of life, peace through cooperation. Earth had made compromises. The aliens had made sacrifices. The hope was that the future would be better, safer, and more united. But there were whispers. Not everyone on Earth agreed with the pact. There were factions, shadowy groups that believed peace with the aliens was a betrayal. They wanted to remain isolated, keeping Earth's resources for themselves and building their own strength. Some even feared that the aliens would come to dominate humanity one day. Yet, in this room, the focus was on unity. It was supposed to be a historic moment. Humanity and the galaxy united for the future. Then, without warning, the silence was broken. A sudden alarm blared through the building, making everyone jump. The lights flickered, and the large screens on the walls switched on. The room fell into chaos as images of an alien colony in flames filled the screens. The voice of a panicked news anchor echoed through the speakers. "We are receiving reports that the Volta colony has been attacked. It is unclear who is responsible, but the damage is catastrophic. The colony is burning. Thousands are dead. The attackers are still unidentified." The room fell silent. President Crow's heart sank. The Volta colony was one of the most peaceful in the galaxy. It had been the first alien settlement to sign the treaty, a symbol of hope for the future. How could this happen? The alien representatives in the room exchanged nervous glances. Some were already standing, preparing to leave. The Galactic Council, AC Ambassador Jorka, a tall being with translucent blue skin, stepped forward. "This is an act of war," he shouted, his voice filled with anger and fear. "Who did this? We must respond immediately." The humans tried to maintain control, but it was clear things were slipping out of their hands. "We didn't do this," President Crow said firmly. His voice shook slightly but held resolve. "We have no idea who attacked the colony." But the room was divided. Some aliens began accusing humanity of orchestrating the attack. There were those who had never trusted humanity, who believed that Earth had always harbored secret ambitions to conquer the galaxy. Their suspicion turned to anger. The peaceful factions were torn. They didn't want to believe that Earth was behind the attack, but the evidence was mounting. The situation was escalating rapidly. The security feeds from the Volta colony continued to show destruction. Flames reached up into the sky as alien ships scattered in every direction. The galaxy was watching, and in the depths of space, the tension could be felt. A silent, unspoken question echoed in every corner of the galaxy. Had humanity betrayed them all? In the midst of the chaos, one figure remained calm. Captain Marcus, a high-ranking officer in the Earth fleet, watched the scene unfold. His mind raced, trying to piece together the truth. He had been stationed far from Earth, working on the outer reaches of the galaxy. He'd heard the whispers about the rogue factions that sought to sabotage the peace treaty. But this was different. This wasn't a simple attack. This was a declaration of war. "It wasn't us," he muttered to himself, pacing in the quiet corner of the room. He had been part of the peace talks. He had seen the hope that the treaty had brought. And yet, here they were, teetering on the edge of a war that no one could win. The alien ambassadors were already in full discussions, their voices growing louder. "Humanity must pay for this," one alien shouted. "We demand justice," another cried. But Captain Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The evidence was being manipulated, and he knew that time was running out. President Crow turned to the room, his face pale but determined. "We must act quickly. We will launch an investigation to find out who is responsible for this attack." but I promise you, it was not humanity. But even as he spoke, the tension was palpable. The galaxies were watching, and no one believed the words coming from Earth's leaders. As alliances began to fracture, the truth became more elusive. The peace had collapsed, and the galaxy, once hopeful, now looked on in fear and disbelief. Humanity, once seen as a symbol of peace, was now viewed as the source of chaos. With the collapse of the Pact, the question was no longer if war would come, but when. The sound of clashing voices echoed through the meeting room, a cacophony of anger and disbelief. The alien representatives were at each other's throats, each race blaming the other, while President Crow stood at the front of the room, trying to maintain control. His hands gripped the edges of the table as his mind raced. This wasn't supposed to happen. The treaty had been humanity's greatest achievement, the shining hope for the future, and now it was falling apart right before his eyes. In the chaos, Captain Marcus stood apart, his gaze fixed on the screen showing the destruction of the Volta colony. He couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this attack than met the eye. Everything about it felt wrong. The precision, the scale of the destruction. It wasn't the work of some rogue human faction. But if not humans, then who? Marcus's thoughts were interrupted by the voice of Jorka, the ambassador of the Volta species. His face was a blend of anger and grief, his translucent skin shimmering with emotion. "This is no accident," he shouted. "You humans have been hiding your true nature all along. The attack was coordinated, and we have proof. It's time you took responsibility for your crimes." Crow stepped forward, his expression steady but tense. "I understand your anger, Jorka, but accusing humanity without evidence is reckless. We are investigating this. Rest assured, whoever is responsible will be held accountable." But the words seemed hollow. The room was divided, and the trust that had once existed between humans and the alien races was crumbling. Whispers spread like wildfire, fueling the flames of suspicion. Marcus could see it in their eyes, the doubt, the fear, the belief that humanity had betrayed them. The broadcast from the Volta colony showed more destruction. Buildings crumbled to the ground, fires consumed entire districts, and the once vibrant city was now a smoldering ruin. Thousands were dead, and the colony's defense systems had been completely overwhelmed. How could this happen so suddenly? Humanity had never been known for such brutal and calculated attacks. The fact that no one was claiming responsibility only made things worse. It left a void, one that was quickly filled with assumptions and fear. Marcus's mind kept racing, trying to piece together the puzzle. Who would gain from this betrayal? Who stood to benefit from the collapse of the treaty? He knew it couldn't be the humans alone. There was a darker force at work. He could feel it, deep in his gut. But who could he trust now? Suddenly, a sharp voice cut through his thoughts. "You must choose a side, Captain," said General Kane, his voice cold and calculating. Marcus turned to face him. Kane's reputation had been built on swift, brutal decisions, but Marcus had never fully trusted him. There was something about the general's demeanor that always seemed to border on the ruthless. "What do you mean, General?" Marcus asked, his tone guarded. Kane's eyes narrowed. "You heard me. The galaxy is already choosing sides. The Volta and their allies will demand justice, and we will fight to protect Earth, no matter what it takes." Marcus shook his head, trying to make sense of the situation. The general was right about one thing. The galaxy was already splitting into factions. But what if this war wasn't just about the attack on the Volta colony? What if there was something more? The truth was becoming harder to find, buried beneath the weight of accusations and mistrust. "We can't just rush into a war," Marcus said quietly. "We need to know who the true enemy is. We need to find out who orchestrated this attack before we start fighting." But Kane's response was chilling. "There's no time for investigations. If we wait too long, it'll be too late. You'll see. The galaxy won't forgive us if we don't act now. Earth will stand alone." Marcus felt the pressure building. It was clear that Kane had already made up his mind. The general's words were like a hammer, driving the nail deeper into Marcus's conscience. He knew that the clock was ticking, but he couldn't shake the feeling that they were being manipulated. This was all too convenient. A peaceful pact torn apart in a single violent moment, and now the galaxy was ready to burn. President Crow returned to the front of the room, his voice steady but strained. "I ask for patience from all of you. We will find the truth. Humanity did not cause this, and I will prove it, no matter the cost." The room was silent for a moment before the accusations began again. The Volta, along with other alien representatives, continued to demand justice. But in the back of the room, Marcus stood still, his mind working through the possibilities. He knew something others didn't, a piece of information that had slipped through the cracks. Captain Marcus had received a message hours before the attack. It was encrypted, a simple message with no sender listed. It read, "The peace treaty is a lie. The galaxy is being played. Someone will make their move soon, and humanity will be blamed." It wasn't from any known human faction, but the message had come just before the Volta colony was attacked. Had someone known the treaty was about to collapse? Had they planned for this moment, knowing it would ignite the galaxy into chaos? Marcus's grip tightened on the back of the chair in front of him. He couldn't ignore the message. It was a warning one. He wasn't sure he was ready to act on. The truth was slipping further away. But he knew one thing for sure: humanity wasn't the villain in this story, and yet, the galaxy was watching, waiting for them to fall. The situation had grown even more dire in the days following the Volta colony's attack. The galaxy was no longer a place of unity. It had become a battlefield of mistrust and fractured alliances. As the debate raged on about who was responsible, Captain Marcus found himself caught between two worlds, one that called for immediate action and another that demanded careful investigation. The pressure on Earth was mounting. Messages from other worlds flooded in, each one more aggressive than the last. The alien representatives, now acting as judge and jury, were adamant that humanity was to blame. But Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that the truth was more complicated than anyone realized. The more he thought about it, the more he felt something wasn't right. Everything had happened too fast, too perfectly, as if someone was pulling the strings behind the scenes. On the battlefield, humanity's military forces were preparing for war. Ships were being readied, fleets of battle-ready soldiers were put into position, and the threat of an all-out galactic conflict loomed over every decision. General Kane had already begun his plans for a counterstrike, arguing that humanity's honor could only be restored through force. But Marcus wasn't convinced that this was the right path. He knew that without the full truth, any attack would only deepen the divide. "We can't afford to act without knowing the whole picture," Marcus had argued during the last meeting. But his words had been drowned out by the clamor of voices demanding action. The world was on the edge of chaos, and everyone was scrambling to hold on to their power. Late one night, while alone in his quarters, Marcus received an encrypted message. The sender's name was blocked, but the subject line caught his eye. "The truth is hidden. The galaxy is blind." Marcus hesitated for a moment, wondering if it was another trap, but something deep within him told him to read it. The message was simple. The Volta attack was orchestrated by a faction within your own ranks. They want war. They want the peace to fail. Do not trust what you are being told. A chill ran down Marcus's spine. Could it be true? Had someone inside humanity's own government been working with the aliens all along to bring about the collapse of the treaty? It seemed impossible, but the more Marcus thought about it, the more it made sense. The factions on Earth who had opposed the peace treaty, the ones who had never trusted the aliens, now had the perfect excuse to start a war. It was brilliant, in its own dark way. Marcus had no choice but to act. He couldn't rely on anyone else. He couldn't trust the politicians or the military officials, all of whom were too wrapped up in the growing chaos. The truth, he realized, was within his grasp, but it was slipping away with every passing moment. The galaxy was too consumed with its own anger to see the puppet masters hiding in the shadows. The next morning, Marcus called a private meeting with a small group of trusted officers. They were loyal to him, not to any particular faction. They understood that the survival of humanity depended not on brute force, but on uncovering the truth. "We're being manipulated," Marcus said as they gathered in the briefing room. The attack on the Volta colony wasn't just a random act of violence. Someone planned this. Someone with deep knowledge of the treaty's weaknesses. One of the officers, Lieutenant Sarah Drayton, leaned forward, her face serious. "So, you think humanity wasn't behind the attack?" Marcus nodded. "I'm sure of it. This was too well timed. Someone knew exactly when and where to strike. The peace treaty was fragile, and they took advantage of that. If we're not careful, we'll fall right into their hands." The officers exchanged glances, uncertainty hanging in the air. They all knew the stakes. A war between humanity and the alien races could destroy everything. And yet, the idea of betrayal, of being deceived by their own government, seemed almost impossible to accept. "What do we do now?" Drayton asked quietly. Marcus paused. He knew the answer, but it wasn't one he could share lightly. "We need to find out who is behind this, and we need to do it quietly. If we make any moves too quickly, we risk the galaxy turning against us." The officers nodded. The plan was dangerous, but it was the only option they had. As they discussed the next steps, Marcus felt the weight of their decisions. They were about to go down a path that could change the fate of humanity. The truth had to be found, no matter the cost. Meanwhile, the galaxy continued to stir. The alien factions were growing more agitated by the day, demanding a swift response to the attack. Jorka, the Volta ambassador, was particularly vocal. He had lost loved ones in the attack, and his grief had turned to anger. He was ready to launch an invasion, to strike back at humanity for the destruction of his people's colony. But not all alien races agreed with him. Some, like the peaceful Viridians, called for restraint, believing that jumping into war would only cause more suffering. As the debate raged on, Marcus couldn't help but feel the tension building around him. His every move was being watched, and time was running out. He had to uncover the truth before the galaxy descended into chaos. If he failed, there would be no going back. That night, as Marcus sat alone in his quarters, he reflected on everything that had brought him to this point. He had always believed in peace, in the possibility of a united galaxy. But now, that belief was being tested in ways he never thought possible. The galaxy was fractured, and humanity stood at the center of it all, blamed for something it didn't do. "I won't let them destroy everything we've worked for," Marcus whispered to himself. He knew that the road ahead would be difficult, but it was a road he had no choice but to walk. The days blurred together, each one filled with urgent meetings and quiet whispers. The search for the truth had begun, but Marcus knew they were running out of time. As the galaxy continued to fracture, the tension grew thicker, making it harder to distinguish between friend and foe. He could feel the eyes of the galaxy on humanity, waiting for the next move. Every decision was scrutinized, every word carefully measured. And yet, despite all the chaos, Marcus couldn't shake the growing suspicion that something was being hidden from them all. By now, the rumors were growing louder. Some of the alien factions were pushing for total war, demanding immediate retaliation for the Volta colony's destruction. Others still held hope for peace, but even they couldn't ignore the growing evidence of humanity's involvement. The longer the silence persisted, the harder it became to convince anyone of humanity's innocence. Even the strongest supporters of the treaty were beginning to doubt their position. As for Marcus, he knew the key to unlocking the truth was hidden within the military's top ranks. General Kane, with his hardline stance and relentless drive for victory, had grown more powerful with each passing day. His influence over the council was undeniable, and he was pushing humanity to the brink of war. Marcus could sense that Kane was more than just an opportunist. The general was dangerous, ruthless, even. But was he the mastermind behind the attack? Or was he simply a puppet, unknowingly playing into someone else's hands? It wasn't long before Marcus found the evidence he was looking for. Late one night, while going over encrypted military communications, he stumbled upon a series of messages exchanged between General Kane and an unknown contact. The conversations were cryptic, but they hinted at something much darker, a hidden agenda, one that seemed to involve not just the Volta attack, but the very foundation of the peace treaty itself. Marcus's heart raced as he read through the messages. There were references to a final solution to the peace process, talks of breaking the treaty apart and triggering a new galactic order. His mind raced. This wasn't just about an isolated attack. Someone, somewhere, had been working to ensure that the peace would fail no matter the cost. And if humanity was to survive, Marcus knew he had to uncover who was orchestrating this chaos before it was too late. The more he read, the clearer it became. The general wasn't acting alone. Someone with vast influence, someone deeply embedded within the galaxy's political landscape, was pulling the strings. The deeper Marcus dug, the more he realized how far-reaching the conspiracy went. There were whispers of secret meetings, hidden alliances, and promises made in the dark. And at the center of it all was a powerful figure who had been manipulating events for years. He couldn't do this alone. Marcus knew he needed help, but trust was a luxury he could no longer afford. He'd already been betrayed once by the very people he had once considered allies. Now, he had to be careful about who he involved. The web of deceit stretched farther than he could have imagined, and every move they made from this point forward would have consequences. With no one else to turn to, Marcus reached out to Lieutenant Sarah Drayton, his most trusted officer. She had always been by his side, loyal and unyielding, and he needed her now more than ever. "Sarah," Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper as they met in the darkened hallway of the military base. "I've found something that could change everything." Sarah's eyes narrowed with concern. "What is it, Captain?" Marcus handed her a datapad with the encrypted messages. As she read, her face shifted from confusion to disbelief. This can't be right," she muttered. Are you saying that General Kane is involved? Marcus nodded grimly. He's not the only one. There's a group of high officials, both human and alien, working behind the scenes. They want to destroy the treaty, to spark a war that will leave humanity standing at the top. Sarah's expression hardened. We have to expose them. The galaxy won't stand for this. Marcus shook his head. It's not that simple. The people behind this have too much power. If we move too fast, we could end up playing right into their hands. We need proof, real, undeniable proof. But as the days passed, the situation only grew more complicated. General Kane, aware that the walls were closing in, began to rally his supporters. His public speeches were filled with fiery rhetoric, calling for the immediate destruction of the alien factions that had betrayed humanity. To the masses, he appeared as a hero, a leader willing to fight for humanity's future. But Marcus knew better. Kane was a puppet, and someone else was controlling the strings. The more Kane spoke, the more Marcus saw the danger in his words. He was inflaming tensions, pushing humanity further down the path to war, and the more he did so, the more Marcus understood that time was running out. If they didn't act soon, it wouldn't matter who was behind the attack on the Volta colony. The galaxy would already be at war, and there would be no turning back. We need to move, Sarah said one evening, after a particularly heated broadcast from General Kane. We can't wait any longer. If we don't expose this now, we'll lose everything. Marcus stood at the window, looking out at the distant stars. We move carefully, Sarah. One wrong step and we'll trigger the very war they want us to start. The decision was made. They would dig deeper, find the truth, and expose the conspiracy for the galaxy to see. But they knew it wouldn't be easy. They had already made enemies in high places, and those enemies would stop at nothing to keep their secrets buried. As the galaxy held its breath, the stakes were clear. Humanity's future hung in the balance, and Marcus knew that the path ahead would be dangerous, filled with uncertainty. But if they were to have any hope of surviving this storm, they had to find the truth and fast. The days were ticking away, each one feeling heavier than the last. Marcus could sense the storm that was brewing in the galaxy. General Kane's rhetoric was pushing humanity closer to the edge, his speeches becoming more aggressive with every passing day. The propaganda was working, the public was riled up, eager for action, and every word of Marcus's caution fell on deaf ears. He had no choice. Now he had to move fast, or everything they had worked for would be lost. Late one night, as Marcus sat in his quarters, alone with his thoughts, a message arrived. It was a simple one, just a few words. Meet at the coordinates. We have a problem. No sender, no indication of who it was from. It was unsigned, but the urgency was unmistakable. His heart skipped a beat. Who would contact him like this? He hesitated for a moment before making the decision to go. There was too much at stake, too much secrecy, and too many unanswered questions. He needed to know if someone else had uncovered the same truth he had. When he arrived at the designated coordinates, Marcus found himself at an old, abandoned station, on the outskirts of the military base, a place that hadn't seen activity in years. The dim lights flickered as he stepped inside, his boots echoing through the empty halls. The place had an eerie silence to it, as if it were holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps interrupted the stillness. Marcus tensed, his hand instinctively reaching for the sidearm holstered at his waist. But the figure that stepped into the shadows wasn't an enemy. It was someone he hadn't expected to see. Sarah Drayton. Sarah, Marcus said, his voice filled with surprise and confusion. What's going on? Why did you call me here? She stepped forward, her face grim, eyes filled with a mixture of fear and determination. I've found something, she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Something big, something that could change everything. Marcus felt his pulse quicken. This was what he had been waiting for, the breakthrough he had hoped for. He motioned for her to continue. I've been digging through the military communication logs, looking for any clue that could point us to the real perpetrators of the Volta attack, she said. And I found something that ties General Kane directly to the rogue faction that orchestrated the attack. It's more than just a few suspicious messages. Marcus's mind raced. He had suspected Kane's involvement, but this was confirmation. What exactly did you find? He asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Sarah handed him a datapad, her fingers trembling slightly. On the screen, the evidence was clear, a series of encrypted messages between Kane and high officials from several alien factions. The messages spoke of plans to sabotage the peace treaty, to use humanity as a scapegoat, and to reignite the war that had been avoided for so long. The words were chilling. They're planning to frame humanity for the attack, Sarah said, her voice shaking, but they're also planning something bigger, a war that will leave humanity as the victor, standing on top of a broken galaxy. Marcus scrolled through the messages, feeling the weight of what he was seeing. He had been right all along. The conspiracy ran deeper than he could have imagined. General Kane wasn't just a puppet, he was a willing participant in this grand scheme, and worse, the galaxy's leaders had been manipulated into believing that humanity was the aggressor. We have to expose this, Marcus said, his voice low with resolve. We can't let this happen. Sarah nodded, but there was a look of hesitation in her eyes. We can't just release this information. If we do, it will throw the galaxy into chaos. There are too many powerful players involved. The conspiracy runs deeper than just Kane. There are factions that would rather see the galaxy burn than admit they've been part of this deception. Marcus knew she was right. The truth was too dangerous to reveal without a plan. He couldn't afford to make a move until he knew how far the rot spread. But one thing was certain, they couldn't wait much longer. Every minute they spent in the dark made it more likely that the war would start. We'll have to take it to the council, Marcus said, his voice steady. We have to find a way to show them the truth, without triggering the war. Sarah frowned. The council, you think they'll believe us? After everything that's happened, after all the accusations, they'll just use this against us. Say we're the ones trying to manipulate the truth. Marcus looked at her, his gaze unwavering. We don't have a choice. The galaxy needs to know what's really going on. We'll make them listen. Sarah looked down, biting her lip. And if they don't, then we'll expose them, Marcus replied. We'll do it the only way we can, by showing them the truth, piece by piece. We can't let this destroy everything. As they stood there, the weight of their decisions pressing down on them, Marcus realized that the path they were about to take was one that would change everything. The galaxy was on the brink of war, and they were the only ones who knew the truth. It was up to them to stop it, but even that wasn't certain. The conspiracy was vast, and the enemies they faced were hidden in plain sight. With a final, determined look, Marcus turned to Sarah. We do this together, or not at all. Sarah nodded, her eyes filled with resolve. Together. And with that, they made their way back into the darkness, knowing that the truth they carried was both a weapon and a curse. The galaxy's fate rested in their hands, and no matter the outcome, they would be forced to play their part in a game they hadn't chosen. The weight of the evidence was heavier than Marcus had imagined. He had always known that the path to the truth wouldn't be easy, but now, standing on the precipice of a galactic war, the reality of their situation hit harder than ever. With each passing moment, General Kane's influence over the military grew, and the more Marcus and Sarah uncovered, the clearer it became that they were dealing with something far larger than a simple conspiracy. The messages Sarah had found painted a chilling picture. It wasn't just about the attack on the Volta colony. That was merely the spark. The true plan was far more elaborate, an elaborate web of deceit, designed to manipulate the galaxy into believing that humanity had betrayed them all. Wasn't just war, it was the complete destabilization of the peace treaty and the establishment of a new order, an order where those behind the scenes would control the galaxy's fate. Marcus's mind raced as he tried to figure out their next move. The truth was out there, but revealing it would be a dangerous gamble. With the galaxy already on the edge of war, a revelation of this magnitude could be catastrophic. Every decision had to be made carefully, and Marcus knew that if they exposed the conspiracy too soon, they might find themselves blamed for the very war they were trying to prevent. Sarah, standing beside him, could see the internal struggle etched on his face. We need to act, Marcus, she said quietly. If we don't stop them now, we might never get another chance. Marcus nodded, his gaze fixed on the stars outside the window. The galaxy, once filled with hope, now seemed like a distant memory. What had been built over years of diplomacy was crumbling, and they were at the center of it all. It was hard to believe that something as simple as a peace treaty could unravel so quickly, but the truth was undeniable. The alliances they had fought so hard to create were now nothing more than fragile strings, pulled apart by the greed and ambitions of a few. The military's preparations for war were already in motion. Ships were being mobilized, soldiers were being rallied, and the rhetoric from General Kane was growing louder and more dangerous by the hour. Humanity's role as the aggressor in this conflict was being solidified, and soon no one would remember the treaty. The galaxy would be too consumed with the idea of retribution to care about the truth. We need allies, Marcus said suddenly, breaking the silence. If we're going to stop this, we can't do it alone. The council needs to know what's really happening. Sarah looked at him, her eyes narrowing. And you think they'll listen, after everything that's happened? They have to, Marcus replied, his voice filled with quiet determination. We'll show them the evidence, piece by piece. We'll expose the truth, no matter the cost. But as they began planning their next move, Marcus couldn't ignore the nagging feeling in the back of his mind. The council was divided. Some members still believed in the possibility of peace, but there were others like Jorka, the Volta ambassador, who were so entrenched in their anger and grief that they would never accept anything less than retribution. The gulf between the alien factions had grown too wide to heal in time. The day came when Marcus and Sarah made their way to the council's headquarters. The building, towering and sleek, was a symbol of everything they had fought for, the unity of the galaxy. Yet, as they entered the high-security chambers, it felt more like a tomb. The air was thick with tension, and the council members, once their allies, now looked at them with suspicion. It was as if the walls themselves were closing in on them. Captain Marcus, Lieutenant Drayton, the council leader said, his voice cold, we have heard the accusations, but as you know, the galaxy is already moving toward war. Your evidence, if it exists, better be compelling. Marcus stepped forward, his heart pounding in his chest. The evidence is clear, he said. What you've been told about humanity's involvement in the Volta attack is a lie. There is a group within our own ranks, a rogue faction that has been manipulating events to provoke war. He showed them the encrypted messages, the ones Sarah had uncovered. The council members leaned in, their faces a mix of skepticism and curiosity as they read through the details. The room fell silent, the weight of the truth settling in like a stone. This is treason, one council member said, his voice trembling with rage. You expect us to believe that someone within your own military is orchestrating this, that this entire war is based on lies? Marcus nodded. Yes, and if we don't act now, the galaxy will pay the price. The war will be fought on false pretenses, and the real enemies, those who have been manipulating us, all will remain hidden in the shadows. The council leader stood, pacing slowly. This is a grave accusation, Captain, and the galaxy is already in turmoil. If we reveal this, the consequences could be catastrophic. We are already on the edge. To accuse our own military of such a betrayal would be the final straw. Marcus knew what he was up against. The council was afraid. They feared that exposing the conspiracy would tear everything apart. But Marcus also knew that the truth was their only hope. If they didn't stop this now, if they didn't reveal the truth, the war would begin, and there would be no turning back. If we don't expose the truth, then we are as guilty as the ones who started this, Marcus said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of his conviction. I don't want war. None of us do. But if we stand by and do nothing, then we become complicit. A long silence stretched between them. The council members exchanged uncertain glances, unsure of what to do. Finally, the leader spoke again, his voice heavy with the gravity of the decision they were about to make. We will move forward with caution, he said. But you are right. The truth must come out. If this war is to be stopped, we must know who is truly responsible. Marcus exhaled in relief, though he knew this was only the beginning. The truth had been revealed, but the fight was far from over. The galaxy was still on the edge of war, and the conspiracy ran deeper than they could have imagined. But for the first time in days, Marcus felt a flicker of hope. They still had a chance. But the clock was ticking, and every decision from here on out would have to be made carefully. The stakes were higher than ever, and Marcus knew that one wrong move could be the end of everything. The galaxy's future hung by a thread. The truth had been exposed, but it had come at a steep cost. Marcus and Sarah had barely managed to convince the council of the conspiracy, but their words had shaken the galaxy's foundations. Now, they were on the brink of a war that would either destroy everything they had worked for or spark a new era of peace, one that could only begin once the last pieces of the puzzle were placed into place. Marcus sat alone in his quarters, staring out at the dark expanse of space. The stars were dim, almost mocking in their peaceful silence. The war was coming, and there was no denying it now. Even as the council had agreed to investigate the conspiracy, the alien factions had already begun to mobilize. General Kane's influence had become an unstoppable force, rallying those who wanted to fight, to destroy, to avenge. Every speech he made was a call to arms, and every word seemed to push the galaxy closer to total chaos. We have to stop him, Sarah had said, her voice barely a whisper as they discussed their next steps. He's not going to let this go. The war is already in motion. Marcus knew she was right. The pieces were falling into place, and Kane was at the center. of it all, but there was more at play than just his ambitions for power. The galaxy itself was broken, splintering into factions too divided to ever truly reconcile. And as the military gears shifted, so did the fate of every living being within the galaxy's vast reaches. If we don't act, it's all over, Marcus had said, the weight of his words hanging between them. The decision was clear. They had to stop Kane. But how? They couldn't simply confront him. The loyalty he had built among the military, the speeches that had stirred the masses into frenzy, those were not things to be taken lightly. There was no simple way to undo the damage that had been done, but there had to be a way to disrupt his plans, to strike at the heart of the conspiracy before it was too late. The door to his quarters opened, and Sarah entered, a determined look on her face. She was holding something, an encrypted file. Her eyes met his, and for the first time in days there was a glimmer of something resembling hope in them. I found it, Sarah said. The final piece, the thing that can stop Kane. Marcus stood up, his heart pounding. What is it? She handed him the file. It's a communication from one of the factions supporting Kane. It's a coded message, one that implicates him directly in the destruction of the Volta colony. It's the proof we need to take him down for good. Marcus's eyes flicked over the contents, his mind racing. This was it. They had the evidence that could stop Kane's rampage. The key to exposing him once and for all. But there was a catch. The message was sent to the highest military authorities, including those who still sided with Kane. If they revealed this now, it could spark a civil war within humanity itself. And that was something neither side wanted. Isn't just about exposing Kane, Marcus said, the gravity of the situation sinking in. This is about the entire galaxy's future. If we release this, we risk everything. The Council will have no choice but to turn on each other, and the war will be upon us faster than we can react. Sarah nodded, understanding the weight of the decision. But we have no choice. If we let Kane continue unchecked, the galaxy will fall into an even worse chaos. We're already on the edge. If we wait too long, we may never have a chance to stop him. They were running out of time. Every second was critical. The war was brewing, the factions were mobilizing, and Marcus could feel the inevitable tug of fate pushing them toward a confrontation. There was no escaping it. The final act was upon them, and all they could do was decide how they would play their part. With no other options, they made their move. Marcus and Sarah sent the encrypted message to the Council, but with a twist. They included a warning, one that could change the course of the galaxy's destiny. If the truth about Kane was revealed, the galaxy's future would be in their hands, and they would have to act quickly to prevent the spiral into chaos. The response came within hours. The Council, stunned by the gravity of the message, called an emergency session. The fate of humanity and the galaxy hung in the balance as representatives from the alien factions arrived, their ships docking one by one. In the council chambers, the tension was palpable. The alien ambassadors were visibly upset, the representatives standing at the ready, prepared for the worst. The leaders of the galaxy had no idea who to trust anymore. Their eyes were fixed on Marcus and Sarah, waiting for them to explain. This is the evidence, Marcus said, his voice calm but firm. This is the truth. General Kane is behind the attack on the Volta colony. He's been manipulating events. To provoke war, we have to stop him before it's too late. The room fell silent. No one spoke for a long moment. The gravity of Marcus's words settled over everyone present, and for the first time, the galaxy's leaders realized the depth of the crisis they were facing. Finally, Jorka, the Volta ambassador, stood up, his eyes hard with grief and anger. We've been lied to. Our people have suffered. But if this is true, then the galaxy has been betrayed on a scale we could never have imagined. We must act now, Marcus said. The military is on the brink of war. General Kane's forces are already mobilizing. If we don't move quickly, we will lose everything. A murmur of agreement swept through the chamber. It was clear now, the galaxy's leaders could no longer stand divided. They had to join forces, expose the conspiracy, and stop the war before it could consume them all. As Marcus and Sarah watched the council members rally together, a sense of dread mixed with cautious optimism filled the room. The final confrontation was about to begin, and Marcus knew that no matter what happened, their world would never be the same again. With the truth now in the open, there was no turning back. The galaxy's fate rested in their hands. All they could do was hope that the truth, no matter how painful, would be enough to stop the war and forge a new path for the galaxy.